we should probably circle back to the movie. That's a tangent on what my desires, my hopes and desires for a Tron game. Hey, if you want a Tron game, let me know in the comments.
Cue Squidward looking at Grave of Hopes and Dreams. What a baby.
Welcome back to the Great American Movie Review, where we review great American movies.
My name is Kyle.
And I'm Mikiah. This is a Movie of the Week style podcast where we take turns picking films, and we have a casual discussion about their context and quality. If you prefer us in audio formats, you can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So this week, the movie that I picked was a favorite of mine from childhood and just something that's important to me, but I picked the 1982 science fiction film Tron, which, if you don't know, Tron, it's about this character Flynn, and he was a computer he was a computer programmer, and he got some of his ideas stolen by a guy who ended up rising through the ranks in a company, and in trying to help sabotage that, he ends up getting sucked into the computer because now this master control program that exists has gone rogue. So
the HAL 9000 of this movie.
It pulls him right into the computer. And yeah, that's pretty much it. But so Tron is a significant film because when Tron came out, Tron is the first ever live action CGI animation hybrid film.
Yeah.
And
I'd say the one that heavily relies on it.
Yes, it was the first one to combine those elements, because there had been CG animation that happened before, and there would, even in live action films, there would be CG animation, but never combining the two different mediums.
Like Star Wars had the wireframe, how to take out the Death Star training video kind of thing.
Right. Westworld had this point of view shots that were technically CGI shots, but
I think Alien also had kind of the same thing just 3 years earlier. So
right. There was implementation of it. It's not the first one to use CG, period, but it was the first one to combine it, and especially to the extent that it does. But Tron was director Steven Lisberger's passion project, and with the support of Disney, who was drawn to the project's unique ideas of blending the computer animation with live action.
They gave him a lot of money for this.
Yes, which at the time was, like we said, a foreign concept. The film was released to mild acclaim, kind of, the reviews weren't like over the roof, but there are people like Roger Ebert who gave it a perfect score back in the day. I have to imagine
the critics at least knew that this is kind of where it's headed. It's very, very pioneering technology. This is just on the forefront. Yeah. And we're just figuring out what's going on. And it's like how AI is being used today. It's still very primitive compared to what it can be.
Right.
So I feel like the critics at least kind of knew that was happening.
Right. I think that they could see through some of the stiffness of it to kind of see what it was actually doing and what it could do to the industry even. And those technological innovations, I think, were the primary, wow, this is actually kind of impressive. But yeah, it was a box office flop when it came out. It only took in $33 million on a $17 million budget, which today's terms is $105 on a $54 million budget, which movies need to make around 3 times their budget to be profitable because of marketing costs that are really high, and theaters also take a cut. So that's generally where, even though it doubled its budget pretty much, it's still,
I would say in that way, it's not a bomb. It's more of a disappointment. Especially for Disney at the time and their prestige. But this still did have the impact beyond the theater. This outsold its movie as a video game.
Yes.
Just a few years after.
Yeah, I think Tron as a property was still a profitable thing for them, which is why they would revisit it back in 2011. And now they have another one coming out with Jared Leto, unfortunately.
It's because also this got the foot in the door right before, the video game market crash from 83 and 84.
Yeah.
So this at least had the very privileged gift of being out there before the crash and before everyone stopped funding video games for a bit. Yeah. It's like a movie that it's basically Endgame. Imagine if Endgame had to release during COVID.
Right.
So that's $200+ billion out of the door. If this had been designed and they had waited a couple years in '84 for the technology to look a little bit better, a little bit more cutting edge, then yeah, the video game circuit would not have lasted for it.
But on the other side of it, if I'm sure somebody else would have come around and done some CG live action hybrid at some point. But the fact is, this is the first one to do it. And maybe in a couple of years, we wouldn't be quite where they were just a few years down the line if this hadn't come out. So
True.
It's kind of chicken and egg situation.
Yeah, what I would say about that is, though, because you feel like this is definitely a step up from what everything has been. So it probably would have looked a lot better. And also, I don't know that somebody else would have come in those 2 years and done something like this.
Right.
Because I think this inspired people to move in that direction. Just a little bit more than it was already going to do.
Right. It was, so to kind of go into like some of the acclaim still of what the film got, it did get nominated for 2 Oscars for costumes and sound. So it did have some...
Do you want to say why it didn't get in on visual effects?
It didn't get in on visual effects because the Academy voters generally thought of computer animation in the way that it used it as cheating. So, which is just so ironic because now in the year 2024, we're watching something like Oppenheimer, something that uses practical effects throughout the whole film and in-camera effects, not get a nomination slot, not get in the shortlist. I don't know if that was
a reason why you picked this movie, but I kind of love that you did that because of just the nature of it originally being special effects, and then they didn't take something like this, but then they changed the whole category and flipped it to where everything needs to be CGI in order to just get nominated or get any acclaim in the visual effects department.
Well, it's really like... This is that next technological advancement. When talkies first came around, they were not taken seriously. When color film came around, it was not taken seriously.
In 1927, Thomas Edison said that the radio would be a disaster financially.
Right. So
what an idiot, dude.
Yeah, those big technological leaps, like this is now the standard practice for like blockbuster tentpole filmmaking. This is just how films are made now. And this was ahead of all of that. This is what inspired that. It even inspired John Lasseter of Pixar when a controversial figure today, just because of stuff that came out around, the way he made people feel uncomfortable. He didn't, seemingly from what I understand, he didn't do anything to he didn't actually harm anybody, but he made people feel uncomfortable. But he still has a job. He just got fired from Disney. He works at Skydance Animation now. He's the head there. But
what does Skydance make?
They made this movie for Apple, and they have another one coming out sometime soon. But we'll see if that becomes more of a thing. Either way, though, John Lasseter, incredibly influential individual in the animation realm, as the founder of Pixar and the director of films like Toy Story, Bug's Life. So, he was directly inspired by this. By the way, there's a really great making of documentary on the DVD for this that, and it's also on the Blu-ray, hidden under the DVD original features section. But there's actually a lot of really cool documented stuff on this film if you want to look more into Tron, because I don't feel like a lot of people have still seen this original Tron, especially in people today. They're not really going back to Tron that often, despite what I think is a very important film in a lot of ways.
I'd say it's got its cult following by now.
It has a cult following, sure, but I think that, the original Tron, if not for the Disney branding angle of it, would just be a cult film.
Well, it would also probably not exist without the video game sphere, so...
Right. So, what are you... I'm really curious, actually, because I have this personal attachment to Tron. I mentioned it last week when I brought it up as what we're going to watch this week, that it is the first movie I remember watching for the first time. There are other movies that existed in my life, like Lion King or Bug's Life or whatever other movie you're watching as a kid that I don't remember watching for the first time. They were just in my life by the time that I started to realize that things were happening around me. Tron, I remember looking at the TV asking my mom, what's that? And being just fascinated by it. And so whenever I go back and watch this, which isn't all the time, but just every once in a while, I go back and watch Tron. And it just kind of puts me back in that headspace of kind of that first thing that just made me start to like fall in love with film and the ideas that you can present in this kind of medium. So I have a generally biased perspective on it, but I do also think that Tron is a good film despite the obvious limitations of it. So what do you think of Tron? Just what was your experience like?
So I was never a Disney kid. I viewed it all as just like meh. Oh, it's the reason I didn't see The Lion King until pretty recently compared to the rest of my life or those kind of movies. But I was never clamoring for all the cartoons. Some of them I was, like Hercules or Aladdin, where there's like a difference that you can feel, and it's not just the normal Disney stuff that they put out. This was among that, definitely. I had seen it, but I didn't really think that much of it because movies had already moved on. That I guess I didn't appreciate the pioneering aspect, or I just didn't really care that much about the pioneering aspect because I could see bigger, better looking things today.
Right. Yeah, by that time we were seeing things like, Lord of the Rings, and then eventually
True, Lord of the Rings, but
like Star Wars films too, and what they were able to do with special effects.
But even like CGI had already been in the like animated space for quite a bit.
Right.
So like it had gone down the food chain and was part of everything at some point. But I will say for this movie, I kind of like it, but not really that much. Like this isn't something I'll go back to quite often. I think it looks cool. Oddly enough, nothing breaks my immersion harder than the live action and CGI shots.
Yeah.
It's pretty awful.
Yeah, it's
like there's a constant like flow between it that just puts me off. It's like they're pulsating back and forth, like oscillating. Right. It's just really annoying to watch.
In those shots, there's no camera movement even because they had to like get the camera like firm on the ground. They shot it all in black and white for like everything in the computer, and to get like the CG and live action stuff, they just kind of had to like plan around what they were trying to do with it in like an entirely black stage room.
So, it's not that I don't appreciate that. It's just that it looks cartoony in a way that a cartoon absolutely would have made it better as like a hybrid for like 2D and 3D.
Yeah, there are parts of this that are an eyesore, even though it is, like doing something different that we hadn't seen before. And it's part of that being the first out the gate, there's some rough around the edges aspects to it for sure.
And it's funny because a lot of people will point to like the vehicle movement as the eyesore, but I think the exact opposite. The vehicle movement and like the light cycle battle and especially the intro of Flynn being sucked into the grid, those all look phenomenal.
Yeah, those are great. I love all that stuff. It's
the live action stuff that looks absolutely awful.
Right. It's when they're like, incorporating the elements together and stuff. Yeah, because even
But that's mostly for the visuals. For the story, I'd say it's very safe. It's not really doing a lot. And everything it does is the themes or the ideas that went into the story,
right?
Not the actual story itself.
Right. I agree with that completely. This movie's not, and same with the sequel, honestly. Tron Legacy has the same kind of thing going. It just looks a lot prettier.
And sounds a lot better.
But
most of that is Daft Punk.
Yes. Daft Punk makes a big difference, although I'm forgetting the name of the composer for this film. She also did stuff for Kubrick a lot. Like she did The Shining and A Clockwork Orange.
Wendy Carlos?
Yeah.
That's who the music is by. So
she's worked on a lot of that stuff. And so that synthy stuff, you hear it in like, I'm thinking specifically of The Shining right now, and it's present here too. And I think it really works for the soundscape of this film, especially since they're working in like computer technology, which computers had not been around that long. You know, the first personal computer
sound on its own is fascinating to study.
Right. The first personal computer came out in what, like the early 70s, like 72, 71.
Yeah.
And so by 82, they were like working on Apple IIIs, you know, like and stuff like that, you know, but it's still early computer stuff. And even trying to imagine this kind of space and idea, you know, within that context is just kind of all like untouched territory in science fiction for the most part. So yeah, they're really more motivated in terms of the filmmaking by the technology and pulling off what they're able to pull off rather than the storytelling necessarily. And I think that does hold it back from being what I think it would be like a truly great film.
Yeah.
For sure.
Because I am always one to look past the way that something looks if it makes me think, if it makes sense, and if it stretches out like narratively.
Yeah, I think in the same year, so 1982 is actually a really big year for science fiction. And just like there's a whole documentary series that they made called 1982 Greatest Geek Year Ever that came out like last year. And I didn't watch it, but I just was like, yeah, it kind of is though, like looking into it more when I heard of that. And so I've been curious to go look at that. But like literally in the same month in that year, you had Tron, Blade Runner, E.T., Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, you know, like, and The Thing, John Carpenter's
Oddly
The
enough,
Thing.
the best movie still.
But and so for the year, E.T. won Best Special Effects, but then you look at Blade Runner, and I'm like, that could have easily, like, those are both better looking movies than this one for sure, you know, and those are.
Well, it relied on, I know both of those. I think Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan had CGI. It might not have.
It does have some, but it's very limited comparatively.
Yeah, Blade Runner uses it mostly for the backgrounds, I think.
Yeah, it doesn't use it very heavily. Most of it's...
Which is smart, because Blade Runner still looks good.
Yeah, Blade Runner does still look good. Yeah, and E.T. obviously looks great. It always has, except for when Spielberg did that 2000s version where he replaced it with CGI, and that was bad.
Oh, he George Lucas'd his own franchise.
He did for some reason, but then I think, unlike George Lucas, he realized his mistake and then just put it out or never put out that version again because they even like removed the guns from like the government agents.
George Lucas made the prequels. Do you think he cared about what the people wanted?
He did not. As somebody who's a very much a prequel defender.
Absolutely, so am I. But
he did not at all.
I'm saying they're good movies. I'm not saying that the people liked them, because the people didn't.
Yeah. But yeah, so the main character here in Tron is Jeff Bridges, essentially playing. Yeah, he's playing himself. Like he's very nonchalant, and everything that I've heard about him and even people talking about him on the set of this is like, yeah, he was just basically being himself, which I think works for this
because his acting is so different than anybody else. Everyone else is sandpaper, basically.
Right.
But I guess that's what the director was going for with like making the air quotes users seem like their programs more.
Right. Right.
Except for Jeff Bridges, who it has to be.
It does give him a contrast, with the other characters, especially in the computer
True, because
space.
he is the only user there.
Right.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so Jeff Bridges is Kevin Flynn. He has his program Clue. I don't understand fully, except for the sake of like making things make sense from a viewer's perspective and something that's already probably pretty dense for the time, in that like the programs that were created by the person look like the person in the computer world. So there's a lot of like dual roles going on.
I mean, you could just say Clue is basically like an avatar. So
right.
Clue is CLU. It stands for, I think, Codified Likeness Unit or Utility.
Yes, they did say that there. But Bruce Boxleitner is Alan in the real world, and he's the one who made the Tron program.
The Tron program, yeah.
Which was basically like a security program that was operating independently of the master control unit. So he's
basically Revolution Bot. He overthrows the tyrant at hand.
Right. But the tyrant in the real world, the guy who runs Encom, the company, wants to like control everything with this master control unit, but he
his
was
name is
never really,
Dillinger.
yeah, Dillinger. He was never really equipped to do so because he
He
didn't
can
earn
only
his way
steal
there.
from people's work. He
Yeah,
cannot create himself.
which I feel like, I mean, that's just kind of true frequently. I feel like if you're getting to the top of like companies like that, you had to step on some people to get there, and that's just who ends up on top a lot of the times.
That's true.
But which is unfortunate, but this movie is one of those where you get to see him get his comeuppance. So
Well, in some cases, it has to be like a charisma plus stepping on a few like
right,
eggshells kind of thing.
yeah,
I just combined stepping on a few people and breaking a few eggs to make an omelet.
yeah.
I'm trademarking that phrase. No one can use it.
Yeah, the other main character in here is played by Cindy Morgan, who actually just passed away. So rest in peace. Like 8 days
I think
before.
I remember seeing that. Yeah, like a couple. Yeah.
They announced it on January 8th, but she died late 2023 in December. So yeah, she plays Laura. She's kind of, it's not a heavily featured thing in the film, but there's kind of a love triangle situation between her and Alan and Kevin. But
yeah,
it's not like that important to the film.
I see it as former girlfriend, still a friend kind of thing.
Right. That's kind of the situation there. But then inside the computer world, there's like some transference of emotions.
They are polyamorous, I guess.
Yeah.
They just go all in.
Well, I think at that moment when he does kiss her, like she doesn't know what a kiss is, you know, because she's a computer program. And so I think he was kissing her and she liked it.
That's not in her random access memories. Hey, oh.
Speaking of random access memories, I did forget to mention RAM.
Oh, yeah.
Who is another program that exists in the world. And so when he gets to the computer world, because the master control unit is like seeing that he's trying to like sabotage him, and then so he shoots him with the laser that digitizes him, and puts him into the computer space. And they immediately put him into the games, which is just such a fun idea, I think, you know, like you're thrown into this world of computer programs, and the master control unit that's just kind of taking over everything has literally become a dictator and has basically made a gladiatorial arena.
That's actually the beauty in it, because the whole thing is the dictatorial regime is essentially the memory. It's literally RAM, where it has to pull from each and every program. So they've made a parallel to real life, and kind of the only way we know how, by competition.
Right, which I think is a fascinating idea.
It's a fascinating idea.
There are some great sci-fi concepts in here.
Yep.
I don't think they navigate the storytelling aspect of it the best, but I do think those ideas are still compelling enough to get those things across.
If you wade through the amazing graphics or the shit graphics, depending on where you stand on it,
right, you
can get to some very philosophical ideas that are crazy compared to what Disney was putting through the entirety of the last century.
Yeah, the live action films in this period of time too. Disney was not what it was in the 80s, because Disney, that's when you started having a lot more competition in the animation sphere. It wasn't until the Renaissance with Little Mermaid in 89 and going
It was
forward.
all concept comedies, but it was all terrible concept comedies.
Yeah, they just were not what they were in the 70s and 60s and earlier. They just weren't that in the 80s. Through the point.
Yeah, their animation,
the Renaissance,
was kind of lacking as well, because it spawned competition like DreamWorks.
Yeah, and Don Bluth and stuff like that. So this coming out and not doing well, frankly, for Disney at the time was not that surprising. Disney was not what it was, definitely not what it is today, which is a whole other animal.
Right.
But yeah, for what they were putting out at the time, this is way above and beyond, I think, on a thematic level, anything that they were doing otherwise.
Yeah, and it's a shame because it doesn't look it, and I mean, I didn't notice it when I was a kid. I still find myself seeing themes that I enjoy about these movies. The only problem is the stories surrounding it are not that good. So it's just an unfortunate thing for me. It's why I'm not excited for the new movie as you are, is because I know it's just going to be pretty lights and nothing else really for me.
Yeah, I do think that Tron Legacy does a good job at building on the philosophical themes of this movie. That's what I really love about the continuation, is that I think that movie develops that to an even greater degree, to the point of artificial intelligence that's born out of the computer.
Not only that, but I like the dichotomy of Tron taking down a tyrannical, basically, program, and then he immediately swaps to the person, essentially the person he's been following the entire time, but just one that would understand him as a program a little bit better.
Right.
And he thinks that he's not tyrannical enough to overthrow him.
Yeah. Even in this film, even in because it's definitely a thing in the other one where there's a whole speech that Jeff Bridges is giving at the beginning, or at least you see footage of it in Legacy, where he's talking about how this is going to change how we view everything, politics, religion, those kind of ideas are founded still in this first film.
Yep.
So there's this, that philosophical and even religious ideas of artificial intelligence and what a computer can change, how a computer can change the world is fascinating.
And it's also, something I want to bring up is when it comes to AI, people think it just picks up as AI is now, it will just pick up some pieces and then build the whole world within a matter of time, but that's not the case. Things like ChatGPT or Midjourney when making art or things like that, the purpose of those is to take data and then regurgitate it in a way that you set it.
Right.
So it can be programmed, and the programmer's fingerprints are all over it, but so are the user's fingerprints are all over AI.
Yeah.
And you see that with the terrible AI art, and you see that with the good AI art. If people know how to cheat the system, they can get better AI art. But the point I want to make with this is AI, as it is now, and as it will be for the next, at least, I think, probably a generation, if I had to guesstimate, it will continue to be that it will reflect the programmers and the users more so than it will reflect itself, because it's not itself. And I like how it showed it in this movie, because it's exactly like that. The programs you make are only as strong as the programmer and reflect quite a bit of the programmer.
Yeah. I love how they differentiate him as being a user in that world and what he's able to do and manipulate within that world that the programs cannot. And they need the user still to make or do anything. You know, they would have been helpless if he wasn't there as a user to actually go in and kind of manually have his fingers on things and making sure things are, changing. The way he's able to change the color in his outfit, to match different things, and the way he's able to turn on and reconstruct the flying, machine and whatever, that the programs just couldn't do because they didn't know how to do it because they needed that.
It's clever the way that he explains it through just showing a dystopian system when, like I said, when it's the master program, I think is what it's called. What's the
master
name
control program?
Master control program.
MCP.
MCP. The MCP is essentially the memory, but for background. So if you place your computer on background or just put it to sleep instead of shutting it down, all the programs that you have in the background will be constantly running and constantly changing how much memory they are given. Right. So this is essentially just traffic for a computer until somebody makes a difference to it.
Right.
Through another program like Tron or through a user specifically directly impacting it. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that they not only had that concept in 1982, but they were able to visualize it pretty well.
Right. For sure. And then, so talking more about the actual techniques that they use in technology. For one, the computer storage stuff that they're using back in the 80s, we're talking about megabytes. We're not talking about gigabytes.
Yeah. Oh, you haven't referred to the best character in the movie.
Bit. Sark. Oh, Bit. Yeah, Bit. Yes.
No. I appreciate, I don't know if they walked into this backwards, but you know the difference between a bit and a byte, right?
I know.
A bit is a character in a Word document, essentially. A bit, or no, that would be a byte. A bit is a single letter
Yes.
It's a single binary, or not a binary.
The 1 and 0.
Yeah, it's a single binary in like a command control, like in a command file. So he got really close to just saying 1 or 0, but he said yes and no, and that is essentially kind of what it is. Because if you make a blank space, it's a no.
Right.
So you save bits that way. So it's really cool that it got really close with just the binary yes and binary no.
Right. You also have Sark, who's like the master control programs.
Oh no, that's Dillinger's.
Minion.
Yeah, that's Dillinger's program.
It's Dillinger's program, which is kind of a nice reflection of the way the master control program is using both Dillinger and Dillinger's program.
Yeah.
And David Warner plays him. He does a great job in this movie, honestly. He kind of could overlook it because of like there's a lot just going on.
No, it's not overlooking. He's the only program with a personality outside of I guess it still would be Flynn. No.
Yeah.
I get really confused whenever I think of Flynn in this movie as both Clue and Flynn. I don't really know which one is the user, except he's like directly changing what he does, unless this whole damn thing is a hallucination, which probably could be true. But unreliable narrator, as I would say at best. But
sure. But yeah, the way that they made this is crazy because, like I said, it's all black sets because they figured they through working out some stuff. They figured out that all black was the way they could get the contrasts and stuff they wanted when they shot in black and white. And they had like layers on layers. If anybody's done any video editing, you know what I'm talking about with layers, where you have different layers of film stacked on top of each other, basically, to achieve the effect where like the light's coming through the suits and color comes through. And because of limitations at the time, they're not just using CG animation. There's a lot of the backgrounds and stuff are like matte paintings or just designed specifically to still reflect what the CG animation would look like at the time. And they, I think, are very successful at replicating that to make it all look consistent.
You know what it reminds me of, though? Like when they're drinking data for the first time at the pond.
Yeah.
The way that it's set up, where it's kind of CG, but it's kind of real life and in like a blocky way, just reminds me of like a Pump It Up or something like that.
Like
I think you can see what I'm talking about.
House, but yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
It just
I would love to play around on that.
Yeah. Yeah. It just looks like a playground compared to what you would expect. But I guess it's what computers would be at the time. It just felt very blocky to people.
Yeah. It's the way that they do the effects too, like the light bike sequence is the most iconic sequence in the film for sure. Which there's been like one game that I've kept on my phone over the years, and it's just like somebody's light bike game that they made. I do play it every once in a while because I do love it so much.
I do have I think it's a Tron version of Snake. So
yeah,
I have that.
Yeah. I mean, that's basically what original Tron game was to some extent.
Yeah, but it was like PvP Snake.
Yeah, right. And but yeah, that light bike sequence is great, and they do a good job. That's where I think they do the best at blending the live action and CG, because it's really just them in cockpits in the bikes. And so they just kind of manipulate the footage so that you can have some sort of motion going on there and make it look like they're in the bikes. That's a pretty good integration, I think, of those ideas.
Yeah, for the time.
And for the time. Everything when we talk about this movie, it's all for the time.
Yeah, this is one of the most of the time looking movie in the world.
And it has to be. I mean, computer effects are always of the time. And then this being the first to incorporate them in such a way, then which I think it's kind of has a charm to it too for me, because it does also reflect computer technology at the time. Like, I don't think this should look better in a way, because if it came out in 1982 and they're using 1982 technology and this is what 1982 computers could make, then this is what it should look like inside of 1982 computers. You know, it's kind of how I feel about it, which gives it a little bit of an extra charm to me.
My feel for endearing only goes so far, which is why I still appreciate the vehicle scenes, even though they look terrible. I still appreciate them because that's what they could do at the time. But the decision to make it more live action than CGI or more CGI than live action. Yeah, it only goes so far because the decisions can be made with that, but what technology you get, you can't really decide that.
Yeah, there are still some clever uses of sets and stuff, which I do think the sets do ultimately look better than a lot of the CG stuff whenever they're combined, because you get like the interior of like the flying ship. That's just a set, a cleverly constructed set. But I do think that's where the movie looks best in its like ideas and presentation. But yeah, it is very much of its time.
Well, it kind of has to, because anytime anything is animated on the screen, it looks terrible.
Right. Yeah. You just didn't have the know-how. These were, I mean, the guys who made this, they were animators. That was what they did. They were, I think, from the Seattle area, but there weren't a lot of animators out there at the time. So
not CGI animators, man. No, that's a contracted thing. Like even more so than normal contracted things. That is man. You had to pick up the ball very early in order to have that prestige, in order to get that.
Yeah, they did like the Animal Olympics for the 1980 Olympics, which got canceled, so that didn't actually end up going to air in the way it was supposed to. And then they worked on they'd worked a lot on just like this idea of like on black animation where like light is coming through. And those things got used in like some radio ads that they sold it to and whatnot. But ultimately, this was kind of the passion project, and the evolution of it and getting to this point was a significant thing. So effectively, Steven Lisberger was a first-time director working on this for like a feature film and in live action for hamiself.
And this is like one of the few things that he directed too. So.
Right. He did like Hot Pursuit in the 80s. And he also did this TV movie with Mark Hamill, or I think it was a TV movie that had like Mark Hamill and Bill Paxton in it, and also in the 80s. And then he never really directed again, but the Tron IP has lived on and he's always been credited there. Yeah. So speaking of the Tron IP, so we've already talked about Tron Legacy a bit, which I feel like I'll pick Tron Legacy at some point, because that's fair. I watch that movie regularly.
Yeah, I could talk about that movie all day. The only thing I would say when it comes to like the original Tron and the original director and writer, because of course he was credited as like the creator of the characters and the story, but he didn't really have a hand on the script. That's why you can tell it's essentially just like 90% homages with 10% like extending the narrative. That's the reason why it's so disappointing, is because it's retreading over the new, making it all colorful, and then not really doing anything with it.
Yeah, I think Joseph Kosinski is a great director. He's obviously proved that a few times now, in his most recent being Top
It's a
Gun
wonderful
Maverick.
Directed movie. Like it's criticism it's given. I don't think we can really give that much the direction or honestly the CGI at the time, because while the Uncanny Valley Clueface is pretty bad, it's hardly like that much worse than what other people were doing at the time. And also like the rest of the visuals all look great.
Right. And kind of like the original, nobody else was really doing the face de-aging technology like that back then.
Yeah.
So not in that capacity. So
which is why he's so like far away in most of his shots.
Right. So the thing, with that one, the most weird looking visual was the one that they were innovating the most on, kind of like the original film.
Yeah, but I can't deny that Tron Legacy has way more fun with it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love Tron Legacy.
Martin Sheen in every single one of his scenes is so great.
Yeah. But then also there's the Tron show that came out, Tron Uprising, with Elijah Wood in it. Has a super unique animation style. I love that show. That might be, from a storytelling perspective, the best Tron thing that's ever been put out. And it got cut short. It's only 18 episodes long. So if you're like somebody who has liked the Tron stuff, but maybe hasn't even heard of that show, check that show out. It's so good. I think it's on Disney Plus, unless they scrapped it from there too. But they didn't obviously give it enough life to really find an audience. But Tron was always a little niche, so it's not really that surprising either.
Yeah.
But that show's great. I love it.
The only thing that would throw me off is I've seen a couple of scenes from that show, and the composer is very much trying to be Daft Punk, but isn't Daft Punk, because nobody is Daft Punk except Daft Punk. So
not even Daft Punk's Daft Punk anymore.
And not anymore. But It's still that kind of EDM or electronica, but it's very
Right.
much trying to be Daft Punk. So that's the only thing that would throw me off. I would be
Right,
like,
right.
stop it,
Yeah.
try something
Yeah.
else.
At this point, I just really, truly just want a really well presented Tron video game at this point. It feels like a no-brainer kind of thing to do, but like there's like a visual novel style Tron game coming out, and that's not what I want, but I'll play it because I love Tron so much.
What's really cool is you can make it because it's never been easier to make video games because of Steam and Epic Games.
Yeah.
So you could make it like a 16-bit look, but also like 3D presenting.
Yeah. I mean, the best presentation of the Tron franchise in video games has been in the Kingdom Hearts series, which I'm a huge Kingdom Hearts
Which
person.
is a
I grew
shame.
up on Kingdom Hearts. I grew up on Kingdom Hearts. I love Kingdom Hearts unapologetically.
I hate that video game, but only because it shows me something that I want to do for the rest of the game. And then it's like, all right, time to move on. Like, here was your little bit of this thing. Let's move on to the next thing.
But I always did love, and I love that in Kingdom Hearts 2, you do get the original Tron representation, because Tron Legacy hadn't come out yet at that time. So it's just like, it looks like the original Tron. You're running around like very Datascape looking areas like the 1982 film.
It's like the video game version of it's like the video game version of ADHD, where you're talking to you're talking to
Donald and Goofy.
Yeah, Donald and Goofy, and then you're like, well, let's go talk to Jack Sparrow, and it's like, what are we doing here?
Oh, and here's Tifa Lockhart. You know,
Yeah.
she's at the Tron computer for some reason.
Yeah, and you're a JRPG now or something. I don't know.
Hey, I like I said, I unapologetically love it, but I don't blame anybody for being like, this is dumb or too much. I get it.
I recognize they're popular
really
games. I just can't play them, man.
But the Tron section's fun. You get to team up with Tron and fight the Master Control program. It's a good time. And then in Dream Drop Distance, you do get the modern visuals. I just wish you got those visuals in like Kingdom Hearts 3 instead, where like they really upgraded their visual, you know, what they're able to produce in that capacity, because Dream Drop Distance was still a 3DS game. So I love having that world, but it's a little emptier than I'd like it to be. I just want a real video game that features the world of Tron as it looks in Tron Legacy. I just want that so bad.
What I want is a 3v3, like what is it, the disc toss? What is the name of the game that they do in Tron Legacy?
Oh yeah, like the I don't remember
fight.
the game itself, but yeah.
Well, they do it. Fight. They do it in the first movie as well, but that's because it's easy to animate like a beam going across the screen, and also just Kevin Flynn just holding up, holding up a frisbee. It's very easy to animate that compared to other shots of other games. It'd be interesting what they could come up with that kind of aesthetic. But you could have something like that, but in the like vein of Super Mario Strikers or something like that, where it's kind of top down as you're looking at it from the broadcast, and it's like 3 people versus 3 people.
There's so many ways to do games with this kind of Tron aesthetic and using the Tron world. I think there's a lot of potential for games, which is why I'm like, a visual novel?
Because to me, unless the light cycle is looking like Rocket League, it's not going to be, I'm not going to play it, because like I've seen the light cycle game from Tron everywhere.
I just want to be able to explore this world, you know?
True.
But I mean, Disney's not done with Tron. Like we said, they're making another one. Tron Ares is coming out with Jared Leto.
Producing it. You know he's going to have some thoughts about it.
Yeah, that's the only bummer for that for me. Ultimately, I'll still take it because it means more Tron. But also, Disney just put in like a big Tron roller coaster in their parks. So.
Oh, that's true. I saw the video for it because I keep up with roller coaster production at an alarming like capacity of my brain of my time. But
I love theme parks, so
the only thing I'll say is it's pretty short. It's shorter than you think.
Yeah, it's not that long, but it is cool still.
Yeah.
And once again, the Tron representation, like I'm all here for it. So Disney's clearly not done with Tron, despite the fact that it doesn't get as much love as I'd like it to.
Yeah, there should be video games of this because that's the way it made money.
Right. That's what it made money on originally. That's how you want to capitalize it. That's the way to capitalize on it. I don't know. That's how I just feel about it. Like if you don't make another Tron movie, but you made like a open world Tron game, I'd be all fine with that. You know, that could last me for a long time.
Yeah, it could be Tron Breath of the Wild, but featuring Sam Flynn.
Yeah, like I swing around in the Spider-Man games that have come out recently. Every Spider-Man game that's ever come out, I've played pretty much, and I would just play it to swing around. You know, just I just want to swing around in that world as that character. I just have a good time doing that, and so I put in tons of hours just doing that. So I would do that in a Tron game in a heartbeat. You know, just if they made it fun to explore, absolutely, all about it.
We should probably circle back to the movie.
We should probably circle back to the movie. That's a tangent on what my desires, my hopes and desires for a Tron game. Hey, if you want a Tron game, let me know in the comments.
Q Squidward looking at Grave of Hopes and Dreams. What a baby.
But yeah, so Harrison Allen Shaw was the visual effects supervisor on this. He worked on the original Star Wars films, so he has a significant pedigree just from that alone.
Yeah, I could tell the wireframe immediately from the Star Wars franchise.
Yeah, so and they used 4 different visual effects studios, which is still kind of the practice today. You're not ever just using one visual effects studio. That takes too long and too much manpower. So back then,
and it also requires like adapting to certain forms of animation through that style.
Yeah, so you had lots of different people working on this film in different capacities, and that's just how films are made nowadays. But this kind of was like them experimenting with that. They're like, how do we do this? Oh, we have to like go to these different studios because we cannot complete this in time with just like one studio.
Yeah, somebody has to do the only CG, somebody has to do the vehicle movement, somebody has to do the live action to CGI thing. Yeah,
one of my favorite uses of actually a matte painting in this is not even in the computer world. I don't know if you knew this, but in the office scene early in the movie, you know those blue cubicles?
Dillinger's office? Or,
the blue cubicles where, like, Alan works.
Yeah.
So that was just, like, a small, I think, animation office on, like, Disney or something like that. And so it's just a small office because, you know, the computer animation program stuff was not very big at that time. But literally the whole rest of the office that you see going into the distance is like a seamless matte painting and it looks perfect. So like I was like that blew my mind. Like out of every visual element in this film, that is what blew my mind the most was that matte painting in that office.
Yeah, I was surprised by this movie's like matte paintings where it shows off like the city in the distance and it looks pretty futuristic, but they still have arcades that are fairly new looking. Everyone's dressing like it's the 80s. Are they in like a particle accelerator lab? Is that where
something?
Because it looks exactly like a particle accelerator lab.
Where she goes like, "Here goes nothing," and then he goes, "Well, actually, here goes something to nothing and back to something again."
Yeah, where he's in like the middle of it all, starting the program starting whatever he's doing, and he gets phased into the grid. I assume that's a particle accelerator lab. It's like, hey guys, we need to stop shooting protons at like the speed of almost light. Real quick, just let Jeff Bridges in there for about 5 minutes. We'll get these takes and we'll leave.
Right.
I mean, Disney has that kind of pull, but it's still absurd.
Yeah. So the cinematographer here had a thankless job, I'm sure. And he was a second unit guy. The live action
cinematography looks pretty good.
Yeah, no, he was a second unit guy on Star Wars. He also worked on 2001.
So he probably had more say into it than most.
Right. And so, but it's still kind of a thankless job here because of like just doing anything new. You just don't know how to do it and you just have to do it the way you can. So I think he does a pretty good job for what he's able to do. His name is Bruce Logan. So yeah, he worked on Airplane too. He was the director of photography of the special effects on Airplane.
Oh no. On Airplane specifically?
Yeah, but he also did like special photographic elements on 2001.
Oh, okay.
He did miniature and optical effects stuff on Star Wars. So this is kind of his bread and butter for the time, you know.
Yeah.
He's working on these films that are pushing the boundaries. And so he was a smart choice to get somebody like that behind the camera on this. But yeah,
quick side thing, because I was looking it up and it took an extraordinarily long time to look this up. So the particle accelerator looking shots, that's the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in California.
It does look like a real lab, so
it definitely was a real lab.
Yeah. Also, just random little Easter egg thing. There is like a sticker in one of the cubicles. I think it's in Alan's cubicle that says "Klaatu Barada Nikto," which is from The Day the Earth Stood Still. So,
the 51 movie.
Nice little like sci-fi references there. There's obviously a lot of passion.
I
for
may or
science
may
fiction.
not be picking that sometime.
Oh yeah, that'd be a good one.
Not the 2000
the Keanu Reeves one
movie. Yeah, absolutely not. I really liked that movie because The Day the Earth Stood Still was one of my favorite movies growing up. So I don't like it anymore. It's not that good of a adaptation.
Yeah,
because it came out strangely close to like that crazy stupid Nicolas Cage movie Knowing. That really made me. It really pissed me off, and I was like,
"Those really did look similar, though."
Yeah, it was. It was the late 2000. It was the late aughts where everyone was like, "Well, we have to make this a disaster-looking movie that also is like the color orange for some reason."
As a sci-fi fan, like that was not the best time for sci-fi.
Nope,
it just wasn't. So,
yeah,
but. I've been really pleased with science fiction the last number of years, though. I feel like it's been getting.
Wait, you're telling me the era that gave us Sharknado was not good for sci-fi?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you ready to get into the scoring on this one?
No, let's do it. This actually could take a lot of time.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, there's a lot to consider when it comes to the scoring. I think here more so than usual.
Yeah.
So, all right, scoring as we always do it is we rank it 0 to 2, 0 being not good, 1 being good, 2 being great. That's just how we do it on the show. Gives us some flexibility, not necessarily our own reflection of our own personal scores, but just how we do it here. So our 10 categories starts as usual with writing. I like the thematic writing. The thematic ideas here I think are really cool. But I don't know.
The dialogue and plot to me are very poor.
The dialogue and plot
are not good. Even on Earth, it's
good.
Rough.
Right.
It is rough.
I'm charmed by a lot of what Jeff Bridges says, but that's just because he's Jeff Bridges playing it nonchalant.
This is young Jeff Bridges. He is
right.
He is as exactly as you expect a young Jeff Bridges
he's flying that big thing, like the airship thing that he flies around, and once he gets into more of like the city area, he's like, this baby doesn't handle so good in town, you know, and stuff like that, that I feel like that just kind of comes from Jeff Bridges more than anything. So I can't really credit the writing too much for like, it's just kind of like I'm still charmed by Jeff Bridges. Yeah, he's a charismatic person. That's just it. So,
if let's make a pact, because we haven't talked about ad-libbed like phrases that often as like this is a big piece of the narrative. So let's say ad-libbing goes more into acting and directing, because it feels like it's the director's job to be like, no, just leave that in.
Say the line as it's supposed to be.
They make the decision of whether it should be the line that's supposed to be or the ad-lib. So it's both of their jobs. It's not necessarily the screenwriters.
Yeah.
So I think I would still put a 0.
Yeah, I'm with it.
Yeah, I think that the story itself was not put in with like screenwriting in mind wholly because of who it's coming from. It's more so as like it would make a great lore for a video game, or it would be a really good graphic novel. Right.
But in the terms of this, I don't think the writing is all that strong.
Yeah. World building, I'm willing to give it a 1 because of how cool the grid looks. And
me personally, I'd firmly give world building a 2, because this movie captured my imagination. This was the movie that really kind of launched a lot of inspiration in my own head. But I feel so much untapped potential within just this movie. I do feel that too, but also it's untapped in a way that like the whole concepts here were untapped completely prior to this movie. I feel like in the medium of film, particularly.
That would be more into impact now.
I mean, you could argue that, I guess.
I am arguing that.
Okay, we'll put in a 1 for world building, but I might feel like debating more about it.
The reason I'm saying that is because I feel like writing world building and characters, we should only put a little bit of, oh, it's from this era into it.
Right. I'm not even saying that from the era kind of thing, because, you know, I saw this,
but also
movie
just
for the
all
first
the
time.
peripherals. So.
Yeah, right. Well, after it came out, I just think it's such a cool concept for a world, and I do think that the world is well realized for what it is, given the limitations. So, in spite of the limitations, they made a cool world, I think. But yeah,
I'd say that's true, but I'd say there's especially for there's quite a few limitations, especially for what's not on the grid.
Yeah, I guess kind of like what we talked about with Enter the Dragon and like the sound,
pretty
the
much.
Limitations of how they shot it. You know, it's just that was common practice for films in Hong Kong, but it does create a limiting factor in terms of what you can do with the audio, because you have to do like lip sync matching and all of that stuff, and it's never perfect.
I could shed a tear. So, you finally get me. No, all yeah. Right, well, as I'm looking at it, it's like if you handicap yourself in a way where your story can falter, it probably will falter.
Yeah. All right. Well, then our next category is characters.
I'm also just on a 1 with this.
Yeah, 1 is fine. Yeah. I'll take a 1.
Because I can't deny that Kevin Flynn does have an interesting background for his character.
Yeah.
Where he's former employee, he's been disenfranchised from having a say in the company because everything was stolen from him. So he doesn't have a say, probably why he was fired, not because he was kind of what seems like a delinquent, not as a bad guy, but as like a person who doesn't follow the rules. And he probably couldn't get away with being a delinquent and having nothing else to show because it was all stolen.
Yeah, and I like, too, that in the computer world, he does kind of have to play second fiddle to Tron, who's trying to pursue his objective, and Tron kind of is the hero of the film in a way. It is his...
I think he's supposed to be characterized as it, yeah.
Yeah, but he's not the main character still. I think Flynn as the main character, it works with Tron being the hero, but still being secondary to Flynn, I think is a smart character dichotomy there within the context of something like this.
This is more of a story where this what you would think is the side character was the protagonist. Well, I guess it's not the titular protagonist being Tron, but Kevin Flynn. I guess he's the side character when it comes to the purpose, but he's the main character when it comes to the movie. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting, too, because, like, Tron is actually a computer function, trace on, but they did not know that when they made this, because they're not computer experts that made this. They are artists. So they do know a lot about computers because they were experimenting in computer animation, but Tron was just because of the word electronic. So, I mean, that's why he was named that.
Listen, in the 1980s, everything was like designed from like a computer standpoint, like the logos and like the names. So it just kind of feeds into that. I absolutely 100% believe that the director just saw that name and then said, great, that's probably what I would have expected it to be called if it were like a dystopian company.
Yeah.
Or whatever the NCOM being the name of the company, but still.
For sure. All right, so that puts characters out of 1. I do think the side characters are kind of fun, too.
And I like the Master Control character quite a bit.
And what's his name?
Is good, but
the older guy, too, that kind of plays the old wizard character, basically, in the computerized
narratively
world.
I want to throw that man away. I have no idea why he is there. He is there for a road. You know what he is? He's the troll underneath the bridge, but the troll is like nice to the characters. So he's just like the guy that lets him through, but he's very much just an obstacle.
Well, he's also the Steve Wozniak to the Steve Jobs of Dillinger in this situation. Of like,
he's
they
the
worked on
guy.
building NCOM, you know, but yeah, he's the nicer one that got kind of screwed over. So, I do like that.
Who was the old man's real life?
He was in the office. He was in the office with Dillinger.
Was he the one getting let go or something? Or he was like basically being told what to do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because he was arguing with him.
I would have loved the character had he more screen time in the real world to understand what his counterpart was going to be.
He was also the old guy working with Laura on like the particle accelerator thing, or not particle accelerator, but you know what I mean.
There for like 5 frames.
Yeah, the one who said the one who made the whole comment about the nothing to something to nothing or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah. No, he's a little bit present there, but I still like him as a side little character and kind of a riff on that fantasy character idea. I think is a fun angle to take something like this. But yeah, character's not a 2, it's a 1. But yeah, still a 1 though. Directing is our next category.
Yeah.
I feel like directing is a 1. It's a first feature film directorial effort. And the fact that he managed to make something that is coherent...
Yeah.
And like just that alone for working with technology like this in this capacity, this film could have been a disaster. But I think that this guy's passion for it really comes through with Steven Lisberger.
Again, making a piece of art where if you didn't have fun making it, we're not going to have fun watching it.
Right. Right. And I think that his passion comes through and really kind of makes this film something that I can still enjoy today, even with all of its, dated qualities. So I'm not going to say it's a 2 in direction, but I do think I would fight for a 1 pretty strongly.
I'm going to agree wholeheartedly. As a debut movie, this is not bad.
Yeah, I have a soft spot too for first features, and that's what this is. Sure, he had more of a budget than most first features do. There's actually a really interesting one that I just watched, The Artifice Girl, which came out this year. First feature, as indie as it gets, but that's typically what you see in a first feature. And it's science fiction too, but it's like 3 scenes in like basically 3 different rooms, and it's 90 minutes. And that's kind of what you typically see in a first feature. And so getting a budget and still managing it and new technologies, I have to give the man credit.
But also that's the thing. If a debut movie is good, it means that the director specifically had an understanding of what he could make given the circumstances.
Right. I think he understood what he could make better than anybody else that was even working with him, from the actors to the different artists. He just managed what he needed to do to get what he needed done. So
and that's
ultimately what a director does.
But that's why if the sequels to this, aside from Legacy, are given screenwriters who care about the story but want to move on, and directors who are competent enough and they still have that visual budget and talent, then they'll make some pretty good movies.
Yeah. It's a world that's ripe for doing some cool stuff.
This thing has
they just haven't
potential.
fully utilized it. Yeah.
More so from the first one than the second one. I don't exactly know what they're going to do for Ares.
Yeah. I really don't know what Ares is going to be.
I mean, the end of Tron Legacy, spoilers for people who want to watch a movie that no one really liked, even at the time. Kevin Flynn essentially blows up the entire grid.
Right, and then the Olivia Wilde character.
And a program becomes a real person. So that's
There's some interesting ideas in there. I don't know, it doesn't fully make sense, but I go with it. I like it still. So,
they missed an interesting, especially because a movie like this was successful not too long after. I mean, Her with Joaquin Phoenix, you could easily have made something like that, where Cora is essentially just like on his phone the entire time.
Right.
So,
right.
And
that's true too.
And it definitely would say a lot more to today than it would for that time.
Yeah.
But yeah, directing one.
Acting. I do think that there are some good performance. Like I mentioned David Warner. I think David Warner is really good in this. He's a British actor playing a villain in an American film, which is a common thing, but he does a good job. So I like Jeff Bridges' just charisma coming through in this too. I don't know if there's enough here to give it a 1 though.
I was thinking the entire time. Because also it's a Disney movie, so they're playing the characters more so funny than anything else. But yeah, Kevin Flynn is at least a believable actor in this one.
I like Bruce Boxleiter too.
I'm not necessarily docking the whole Alan Bradley's character and Laurie, the program, or Yuri?
Yori.
Yuri.
Laura in real life, Yori in the program.
So Yori and Tron are bland as can be. I don't fault that because they're literally programs.
Except for they're playing it the way they're supposed to.
Except for the fact that Sark is somehow like so much more charismatic as everything. I kind of understand the master control program because it would make sense that that essentially is AI because it's going past what it was programmed to do.
Right.
So it makes sense that it would at least have a personality that's antagonistic because artificial intelligence is antagonistic towards what it's supposed to be. So yeah, I understand the master control program, but yeah, I agree. It's nothing special.
It's not enough to get it to a 1, I don't think.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the movie's strongest thing. Visuals, on the other hand.
Yeah, it's a 2.
Yeah. I think that just
I wasn't gonna fault you on visuals for this because there's not really anything like it. And I think some of the CGI still looks really, really good. That intro sequence is very good.
Oh, yeah, that intro sequence where it's going through like the tunnel. That was like one of the animation studios I think like worked mostly on just
they had to parallel it. But also the intro of the movie where they're showing the entire city and they're speeding it up as if it were like programs using memory kind of thing. So it's a parallel. Yeah. But everything that being paralleled like that, I really like from a visual storytelling standpoint.
Right.
Really, really good.
Yeah. Our next category is editing. And I do think editing is a 1. I would even say editing as a strong 1, given, the circumstances of the filmmaking. But I'm not going to like elevate it beyond that because this is kind of the limitation thing, kind of still holding it back a little bit.
Yeah.
But I do think that
it's nothing special even from the time.
Right. When you compare it to the grand scheme of film, I just think that once again, like just creating a coherent thing going on here is just impressive in its own right. So I do think that the editing works for the film in the way that they're needed to, though. So yeah, editing's a 1. Sound, this is me, I'd give sound a 2. I think they create a really unique soundscape. It did receive an Academy Award nomination for Sound 2, which I'm just using to back myself up there. But I'd give the sound a 2. I think that the score is way better in Legacy to like such a degree that it could be almost easy to dock this one. But I think the score works for this, for what it is and when it came out.
I'm going to agree. I can't dock this movie because they're not Daft Punk because like I said, nobody else is Daft Punk. Only Daft Punk is Daft Punk.
Right.
But yeah. It's definitely not as good as Tron Legacy, but it's not bad for this movie.
Yeah. I think the soundscape of it is really unique and interesting. There's a lot of computer humming and just like stuff like that going on. I really like the way it sounds. Let's see, genre, science fiction.
I think I'm leaning towards a 1 on this one if it's sci-fi because that covers a lot of things.
The thematic material, I think, is really good and interesting.
Yeah.
And
kind
like
of the way that Snowpiercer was.
Yeah, it's kind of not... It almost can't be as fully realized as it could have been just because they didn't know. Like, you don't know exactly. You're in some ways being predictive, which is what science fiction does to some extent. But...
They also did know a surprising amount. I wonder what background the director comes from.
Yeah.
Or whether if I were directing this and wanted to get the themes right, I would absolutely contact some computer programmers of the time. And also they were working with some, so they could just ask them. But the themes got a surprising amount of things right.
Yeah, I would give it personally a 2, but I won't fight you on a 1. Is kind of where I'm at with genre.
It's just simply because of the fact that when it comes to this movie as a whole as well, not just the themes, not just the story for a sci-fi story,
right?
But for everything, it's middle of the road, I'd say.
Its presentation is holding it back a little bit and to some extent or another. And it's not quite as accessible as I'd like it to be because of those things.
That's another thing as well. I know I said personally I didn't like this growing up, but I could easily see how somebody couldn't get behind this because of the way it's presented. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like most people, I really do feel like most people would look at this and be like, nah, pass.
Yeah. Like I
Um,
said before, I was just looking for bigger and better things at the time, which
yeah,
were it was easily accessible to me.
right, right.
But I'd say at the
Um,
time, I would love Blade Runner a lot more than this. Still.
oh, I mean, Blade Runner is so good.
Yep.
I love Blade Runner, even with that stupid narration that they took out,
You
fortunately,
mean the
in
most
later
charisma that
versions.
Han Solo was given without being Han Solo?
Yeah, it's really bad. Like the narration on that original release. Yeah, which that was another movie that didn't do well at the box office that came out in '82. So yeah, science fiction wasn't blowing up the box office at the time.
What was the budget of Blade Runner compared to Tron?
That's actually I don't
I'm doing a
know.
quick
Yeah,
30 million. I believe it. Those
yeah, versus
sets,
Tron
man. Those
17.
sets are
Yeah,
insane.
yeah, they had a little bit, just like a
More
little
going
bit more
for
of
it.
a hit thing to climb to become profitable. But how much money did Blade Runner make?
42 million is what
Yeah,
I'm seeing.
that's a bomb. What's what that is? That is not just a flop. That is a bomb.
Yeah.
That's they definitely like lost money on it definitively.
Yep.
So yeah. Let's see. But our final category is impact. I think it's pretty undisputable too.
Yeah.
Just because of industry impact that it's had.
I agree entirely.
Yeah, there's no really I don't really think there's much of a way to debate around that. Just it came out at the time that it did, and it really did. This is how films are made now. Like I watched The Little Mermaid from earlier this year, which I thought about Tron when I was watching those underwater sequences, which I don't think look very good in the Little Mermaid movie that
That
came out
probably
this year.
brightened your life a little bit because The Little Mermaid surely did not.
Right. Those underwater sequences I think are pretty ugly. I think the special
I'm
effects
just
work is
imagining
impressive.
that Team Fortress 2 thing
Yeah.
where the pyro is like destroying everything with fire, but the things that he's seeing are like rainbows and butterflies.
Yeah.
You're watching The Little Mermaid, but you're not seeing it. You're seeing Tron.
Right. Well, because it's like I was thinking about like how they filmed it, and it made me think of like Tron and how they filmed Tron. Just like those sets, those simple sets, green screen, blue screen, whatever it is nowadays. You got some elements in it that are practical, but man, for the most part, that's just like floating heads.
Yeah.
And just like floating torsos, just like talking to probably nobody. So, and that's what it felt like watching it to some extent.
Yeah,
But
I don't know that
that's just
I don't know that that's going to get better though, because the whole point is we can't really relate to that because when we open our eyes underwater, even with goggles, it's kind of
right,
like it's a lot crisper than you think it is. It's not
right.
wavy. It's the sunlight that's being like wavy and refracting. So like
Yeah.
seeing the Little Mermaid on screen and the uncanny stuff does not help it at all.
Yeah, but The Little Mermaid, I think, is a bad example of how this technology has been implemented over time. But I do think just blockbuster films in general, most of the time that they're doing it well, you really don't notice that
Yeah.
they're filming it in this way. It's just the technology's advanced to such degree. So when you do notice it, it sticks out. But most of the time, if it's done well, you're not even noticing when they're making films in this way. It's just crazy.
Which Blade
Like that
Runner
kind of
achieves
stuff.
that because it's not going for the same thing. So
Right. Blade Runner's, yeah, it's not using the same techniques or anything. It's using mostly practical elements. So,
yeah.
all right. So, but that for the total on the score, that puts us at an 11 out of
Oh,
20,
we're not
which is,
redebating world building?
no, I'm fine with where it
You
is.
don't want to start a fight?
Nah, I'm good.
Okay. You
I
got
think
your above average grade and you were like, "Nah, all right. Turn it in."
well, also, I already argued against my own point when we were talking about when I brought up the Enter the Dragon comparison for world building. So that's where I was like,
Curse is foiled by me again.
yeah, I foiled myself using your logic.
Yes.
So, you're the master control program.
Be careful, you'll get addicted to that logic.
But yeah, that puts us at an 11 out of 20, which we've had a number of those. I think
We've had quite a few. We had a string of like
that's
3 out
where,
of the last 4 one time.
yeah, in October we had Sleepy Hollow and we had Blade 2.
We had
kinda
Blade
ended up
2
there
and then we
too.
had Overlord, I think, which was 11.
Yeah, and Overlord I think all ended up at 11 out of 20.
Yep.
So yeah, that's I guess our most common score at this point, perhaps maybe next to 18 out of 20. But
As I said before,
yeah,
I firmly believe this is going to end up being a bell curve depending on the movies that we watch.
right, right. So yeah, but yeah, I think that my enjoyment of Tron, I have such a personal attachment to it that I can't fully separate myself from it. But yeah, I do still think that from a filmmaking standpoint, it really holds a fascinating point in film history.
It does.
And kind of, yeah, it really kind of is the pivot to a completely different way of making films, you know? So I'm glad I was able to talk about Tron. I have a big Tron poster in my house. I love Tron, so I'm all about Tron.
I notice you're not moving away quite as quickly as usual. I think you just don't want to stop talking about Tron.
How often do I get to talk about Tron? But anyway, Kyle,
bring in Tron Legacy. We could do a new release when Tron Ares comes out.
Sure, absolutely. I'll talk about it. But anyway,
let's do a Kingdom Hearts
what
review.
Are we? Hey, I'll do a Kingdom Hearts review on my own. I don't want to hear you trashing it all the time.
I'd mostly be trashing the mechanics of the first few and then the story probably, but yeah.
But anyway, Kyle, what is the pick for next week's episode?
So we're staying kind of around the same time as we always have, like that 60s, 70s, 80s somehow. But
oh yeah,
I'm picking a movie where it's not the people that I want to talk about in it. It's the story that I am eager to watch because I finally have a reason to watch it. And I'm going back to a writing centric movie.
Okay, so is this something you have seen or have not?
This is something I have not seen.
Okay, so you're like, here's an opportunity.
Yes, exactly. Nice. We're going to watch Chinatown.
Chinatown. I actually watched that. Yeah, I've seen Chinatown.
Yep.
So
I figured
here's one that I've seen that you haven't.
Because it's something that everyone has seen. People who like
I said
movies.
It really excitedly, but like it's not an exciting movie.
No.
It's pretty dour.
That's from what I hear, but I mean, you love dour.
Yeah, it's a Roman Polanski film, which is already like, I don't think we'll spend too much time talking about Roman Polanski.
On it, but
maybe a small rant in there somewhere.
Yeah, I'll rant on it, something parallel to it. I won't exactly rant at Roman Polanski. I almost called him Poland.
Yeah.
Poland Polanski.
Yeah, but Chinatown, not a fun movie.
No.
There's some very iconic stuff that the most parodied thing in the movie, which I won't say it now just in case anybody hasn't seen it and wants to catch up before we talk about it. The most talked about and parodied part of that film is horrible. It's absolutely horrible. So, but it's a classic for a reason though.
Yep.
So that's a good one for us to talk about. But I think that'll do it for this week's episode of Great American Movie Review. Thank you for joining us. As usual, I'm Mikiah.
And I'm Kyle.
We haven't rehearsed the outro.
No, we haven't.
At all.
I didn't know you were going to
do
that.
So every time I pause for that, there's like a longer pause in between. But that's okay. Once again, find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you at the movies.